Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our first webinar looking at this new JAR and TVision call for research ideas. So my name is Colin Campbell. I'm the editor of JAR, and we're joined today by Germaine, Montagne, the head of marketing at TVision, and then also Kelsey, Hanlon, the director of data and analytics at TVision as well too. So we're super excited to have you. Thank you for joining us today and telling us more about TVision's data. We're going to start off with having me just describe a bit more about what exactly is this data release and call for ideas. I'll talk a little bit more about what we're looking for in terms of strong applications, and then how to go through and apply. Then I'm going to turn it over to Germaine and Kelsey, and they can tell us more about TVision, the amazing data that they collect and how they collect that, and what they've got available and the kind of questions they're looking for as well with this call. Then, of course, we want to get to any questions that you might have and go through and answer those too. So please, throw any questions you've got in that Q&A box. We'd love to go through and hear any questions you might have. So let's start off with taking a look here at what exactly is this data release and call for ideas. So it's similar to a call for papers, which I know many academics are familiar with. We've all, I'm sure, submitted to different call for papers that are out there. What we're looking for here are different ideas of research studies that you want to go through and do. And the idea is to go through and provide us with those ideas, and we're going to take a look at them and then potentially provide you with data that you can go through and use to answer those ideas. And the goal of this is really to bring together the amazing data that industry has with the energy and enthusiasm and expertise that academics have as well too, right? And this is, I think, a really cool initiative to make it easier for academics and industry to get together and to create really cool insights that push our understanding of advertising forward. Obviously, applicants are going to go through and get access to an amazing data set if they're successful. What we're looking for from applicants are three different key things. One is obviously signing an NDA with TVision. This is going to be an NDA that does not preclude you from going through and publishing your findings, but of course it is going to restrict you from using it for other sort of commercial purposes or things like that. And this is something we just expect from applicants to go through and do before we'll give them access to the data. The second thing is to go through and to try submitting to JAR before submitting to other outlets. We obviously hope you're going to be successful in publishing at JAR because we're very excited by this topic and the insights that are hopefully going to come from this data set. But if you aren't successful at JAR, you're of course welcome to go and submit to other outlets as well too. The final thing we're going to ask applicants to go through and do is once they finish their first draft of their paper is to go through and prepare a short slide deck for TVision summarizing their findings. And this just enables TVision to better understand the insights that you've got as soon as they're available and to go through and share that with partners that they might also want to share those results with too. So again, NDA, submitting to JAR first before other outlets, and then going through and preparing that slide deck for TVision. How the applicants are going to be assessed is going to be both by TVision and JAR. And what we're looking for are two different things here. One is going to be the contribution to knowledge. And this is going to be both in terms of theory, right? What are those insights and, I guess insights and, cool things you're going to learn that are going to be helpful for all of us to push the field forward. And then importantly, what's also going to be useful for industry. So we're looking for insights that are actionable that can be used by, of course, TVision and of course, others in the field as well too. So those two different sort of facets, right? Contribution to theory and also contribution to the field. And this is really a nice fit between TVision, who obviously care about both of those things, and JAR as well too, which is the premier journal for that industry focus. We're also going to go through and take a look at the ability of each team or the likelihood of each team to go through and be successful. And we're looking at different things like, have you done analysis of big data before, right? Do you have expertise in the area of attention, right? Have you gone through and been trained on or used the methodology you're proposing before as well? And the reason for this is that there is a big investment on the side of TVision in potentially working with you to get access to this data, to provide support for questions you might have, and also to help you better understand the data set as well too. So we want to make sure that teams that TVision chooses to work with are going to be likely to succeed with the data set that they're going to get access to. So please, as part of your application, think about how can you let us know that you're likely to be successful if you do get access to this data. The application process is pretty straightforward. It's a Google form that's open until March 31st. There's a QR link for that as well. Basically, the first thing you want to do is confirm that you're an academic, that you don't have commercial interest in this area. This call is only open to academics. If you are interested commercially in access to the data, definitely reach out to TVision. They would be thrilled to work with you on that, but it'll be a private sort of call there. We're going to ask you to describe the research idea or ideas that you'd like to investigate using the data. We're also going to ask you to describe what makes you likely to succeed with this investigation. So tell us more about your background or similar projects you've done or training that you've done that help us understand that you're going to be successful with it. Links to your faculty pages of everybody on your team, and then the resume or CV of your team members as well too. So it's not meant to be as big as like an NSF grant. So it's meant to be relatively short and sweet to go through and do. And it's open until March 31st. You can submit anytime between now and then. And we'd love to, start working on those, take a look at those on a rolling basis if we get, some coming in before then as well. Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to Germaine and Kelsey and let them tell us more about TVision and the exciting data that they've got. So I think you're on mute, Germaine. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Germaine Montagne, head of marketing for TVision, and I'm going to start this presentation with probably one of the most overused quotes in advertising, which is that, advertisers are always trying to find out what part of their ad spend is wasted. And TVision, I think, is in a very unique position to help the industry understand what part of their ad spend on TV is effective. So if you go to the next slide, we operate a panel across the US. We've also recently established a panel in the UK, and we have a panel as well in Japan. But for the extent of this project, I think we want to focus on US data. So we operate a panel that we recruit people to install our devices in their homes. We're in about 5,000 homes across the US and multiple DMAs. We have about 15,000 people in our homes, and we basically will normalize all of the data that we receive from our panel to make sure that it is nationally representative for the US population. So if you scroll to the next page, what we're measuring is really how people watch TV. So our panelists installed the devices in their home, and with that device, we're able to see, are they present in the room? Are they paying attention to the TV? As well as what content or advertising they're seeing on the television, regardless of whether or not they're watching a linear broadcast. If they're watching cable, maybe they're watching their favorite CTV app, all of that data is ingested by our technology. And I will say that our panel is, volunteer. People are being paid to install our equipment. So there is no question about their participation or what data we're collecting. The data that does come through, if you want to go to the next slide, we get a variety of data signals from our technology. The little red thing at the top of the screen there, you can see is actually a webcam. So our panelists are installing a webcam. There is an initial training period where we are taking a look at who's in the room and matching that up with our panelists so that we can basically make anonymized distinctions later. But after that first initial training period, there is no imagery that's sent back to TVision. Everything is just done through facial recognition and skeletal recognition to identify the panelists that are in the room. We also use ACR fingerprinting, which is audio content recognition, to understand what's playing on the TV, whether or not that is an ad or a broadcast or a movie on Netflix. We have a digital meter, which is in the green box there. And with that, we're just determining which device is in use. We can see if the TV is on or off. We can see which app is being used on the TV. And so with that, combined with our ACR fingerprinting, we're able to determine both linear TV, which would be like broadcast television, ABC, NBC, those traditional channels, as well as your CTV apps like Hulu or Netflix or Amazon Prime. We also just are able to understand time shifting and which and map both the content as well as the ads that are aired. If you go to the next slide. So, like I said, we are able to provide data on both linear as well as CTV. We're measuring all major national channels and local broadcasters. So if you have like a local access station, we probably are not capturing that in our data, but we are capturing, major local channels. We also see over 1,100 different streaming device models. So that would be things like your Roku stick that you've plugged in, or your Amazon Fire Stick, whatever it might be that is connected to the device that is sending a different sort of fingerprint to us. We see over 28,000 streaming titles. I will admit that there is a very, very long tail of streaming content. So we don't have all streaming content mapped, but if it is a semi-popular or maybe not even that popular program, but we've encountered it enough time in terms of our panelists' viewing behaviors, then we will have mapped that content out in streaming. We have over 6 million program impressions and across both linear and TV, NCTV. We see over 69 million ad impressions, again, across both linear and CTV. And we are tracking activity every second. So part of how we're able to determine things like viewability and attention that people are paying to the TV is done by looking at what is happening each individual second in our panelists' homes. So we can see, are they looking down at their screen on their phone and then looking back up at the TV? Did they walk out of the room and then did they come back into the room? All those types of things are the types of data signals that we're able to measure on a second-by-second basis. Another sort of point of distinction, I should probably clarify it because it's in the title here on this slide, is a walled garden. So within the CTV space, there's certainly a lot of CTV providers like YouTube or even a Netflix that are going to report out metrics on their own and not have sort of an open and transparent marketplace in terms of sharing data externally. TVision's panel, because we are installing our own technology and monitoring what's happening in our panelists' homes, we are able to detect and report on activity within those CTV walled gardens. So that's a pretty distinct thing for TVision and something that's hard for the industry to access outside of using a panel provider like us. If you go to the next screen. So when we get this data, what are we able to do with it? Well, we can really help answer like the who, what, when, where, and how of TV viewing. So we can identify what program or ad is playing on the TV. We can identify how that content is getting to the TV, whether or not it's being streamed, excuse me, through CTV, which app is on, which device is in use, all that type of stuff. We can determine which individuals are in the room, again, within our panelists' homes. So is it the dad watching, Disney Plus with his son, or is the dad watching ESPN on his own, or maybe the family all together is watching a movie on Friday night, whatever it might be. And then, like, as I mentioned, we are also able to determine if they're paying attention to the TV. So are their eyes directed at the TV screen? Are they taking a nap on the couch? Some of the data that we see is pretty interesting in terms of things like overnight. So overnight ads generally have high viewability because someone has fallen asleep on the couch, but they have low attention because they are asleep on the couch and not paying attention. So things like that are sort of interesting tidbits. If you go to the next slide, I think Kelsey's going to walk us through some of the details of the data and how it's organized. So,
thanks, Germaine. Yeah, so as Germaine mentioned, all of our data is person level, second by second. So we take all this data that we get every single day, every single second of the day by every household, and we consolidate it into, I would say, 5 major data sets. So when we talk about ad impressions, that's going to be an ad being delivered to a home and an individual person being exposed to that ad airing. So if you're looking at, let's just say Bounty has an ad in the Super Bowl and you're watching that on NBC, that's an individual exposure. So when we have both ad impressions for our CTV data as well as our linear TV data. So did the ad get delivered via a traditional broadcast and cable? That would be our linear TV ad impressions. Or did the ad get delivered within a CTV environment? Let's just say you're watching Hulu and an ad got delivered in Handmaid's Tale. Additionally, with that, we also have program data sets. So this is very similar, but instead of looking at the actual ad exposures, we're looking at an individual tuning into a particular program airing. Again, so if you're watching the Super Bowl on linear TV, that would come in as an individual exposure to the programming content as a whole. Whereas again, if you were watching Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, that would be an individual exposure at a program level. And the reason we separate these items this way is because there's different types of questions that the industry will ask, whether they are they're programming content focused. They want to understand how people engage with certain content, what are the drivers of engagement, why are people making certain selections with content. And then you have the industry part that is more brand focused, and they're just trying to understand how their ads did in media and where can they really get the most out for their money and for their buck. So out of these 4 data sets, there's different types of questions we can ask, but some of the major ones that you'll get in this data set is the content and ads themselves. So all of the metadata that's associated to an ad, the industry that it's in, the sub-industry that it's in. We have unique identifiers for every single creative that came in the marketplace, the videos themselves. So you can actually watch the ad to get an understanding of the feel for the ad, as well as the creative length. And then the content itself, again, all the type of metadata that you get for the content, the programming. So what genre is that content coming from? What is the title of the content? Unique identifiers, again, for that content. Additionally, in this data set, because we are tracking second by second, we get all the identifiers of when it's occurring. So what time of day is it occurring on, whether that's a UTC time, their local time, what in their local DMA, Eastern time, when they started the ad or the program, when they ended watching the ad or the program, when the program actually started, regardless of whether they tuned in. So again, I'm just going to use Super Bowl again. Like, let's say the game started at 8 o'clock. That would be the program time when the program started. Then maybe I started watching it at 9 o'clock at night. So there's different distinguishing identifiers for timestamps. Additionally, in this data set, we get all of the demographics of who is actually in the room and engaging. So how old is the viewer? What's their ethnicity? Are they Hispanic or not? What's their household income? We even get down to political party, education. So we can get really granular as far as the metadata, because that's all provided to us from our panelists. And then with all this metadata that we have, we then actually look at the metrics associated. So how long are they in the room? How much attention are they paying when they're in the room? And are they in the room with anyone else at the same time? So we get down to very second by second data. We can actually tell how many seconds someone's in the room with another individual in the home. And this allows us to do a lot of fun things with our data, but you can start to build different audience segments from it. You can start to look at how audience pay attention, engage with different types of content and ads. And then are there any type of drivers of engagement based on any kind of viewer demographics? So those are our exposure level program and ad content data sets. We then have a data set, we call it auto device person, but really that's our app and device detection. So as Germaine mentioned, we are getting kind of that how that content got there, what application it's coming from, what device and it's coming from. And we have a data set that looks at a very high level to say, when someone's tuning in, regardless of the content that they're watching, what application is in use and what device is it coming from. So this is very similar to the impressions. When we call an impression, it's again, a person level exposure. So this is a person exposure that they are tuning into a device at a session level. So again, we get app, device, the application type. Is it coming from an ad supported application? Maybe a subscription type where there's no ads delivered, maybe an ad that's free and you don't have to have a subscription model at all. We get all of the same metadata for the viewer, that comes from our panel. And we can start to understand, again, when these people are tuning to apps, maybe again, the Disney Plus scenario, do people tune into certain applications more together? Or are there certain applications that they're going to that are more individual? So we can look at the time that they're actually spending with each of these apps. How does that vary over time? Are there specific spikes around seasonality effects that might drive tuning? And then we can also take a look at how the distribution between an AVOD service like YouTube versus an SVOD service like Netflix, how that's changing over time as these different models and these different tiers are coming to market. So what are people choosing to subscribe to or tune into? And how is that shifting as the market shifts? Additionally, because we know all the devices in the home, we can start to understand how many devices each home typically is accustomed to, how many devices do they have connected to the television, and then not only that, how many programs are they typically accessing, how many applications are they typically accessing within a given time period. And then lastly, all of our data is it's second by second data. So we do translate that. We can start to look at hour by hour trends and how viewership tends to differ, whether you're watching maybe, at night, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night when you're sitting down, versus maybe you have the TV on in the morning or the afternoon, whether that's your news stations or really whatever that may be, whether maybe you have Spotify on the television, you're listening to music throughout the day. So viewership certainly changes based on hour of day, and we can start to isolate those trends. Okay, next slide. Germaine, do you want to take this one or do you want me to? I think you're muted.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was muted. Either way, Kelsey, we did have 2 questions that came through about the data. So maybe we could just answer those really quickly before we move on to this next one. One was asking about co-viewing and what if friends and family come into the household that are not part of the original panel.
Yeah, great question. So we do track, we call them guest viewers. So because all of our panelists are trained, we have demographic profiles for all of the individuals in the home that are trained. So if someone comes in to the household, we align, using our facial recognition, we'll assign a profile to that viewer that is the closest profile to that individual. So I'm a female. If I have a friend come over that's also a female, they would get that profile. There are some instances where if there's only one, let's say I do live by myself. So if there's only one profile in the home, every guest viewer, if we have a close proximity, we get that profile. If not, we don't assign them a profile because we don't have a close enough match to the main person in the home. We do have unique identifiers that do separate whether it's a panelist versus a guest in the home. So we have 2 different unique identifiers. One will be just, this is the profile of that demographic, and then this is the ID assigned to the viewer. Because everything is second by second, we can determine if there are guest viewers that they are co-viewing. So that is certainly not a blocker for us.
Great. And you know what, I'm remembering that we were going to do a Q&A at the end, so I'm going to hold the other 2 questions that came through till the end there so we don't interrupt Colin's flow. But in terms of the research that we're interested in, so TVision does publish a lot of research on our own. We present our research at conferences, including the ARF's conferences. We've presented pretty regularly at ARF's Audience Time Science, as well as this past time we just did something at the OTT 2023 conference. So we're always trying to find really interesting stories about our data. A lot of where we're getting interest from the industry and what people seem to be interested in reading about or trying to figure out is CTV. I think because CTV is obviously a very quickly growing media channel, and there's a lot to learn about the CTV ad experience and how CTV viewing differs from linear, if it does, or possibly how it's starting to mirror more of linear. We've seen interesting things like ad attention in CTV at first was much lower than in linear. So even though viewing attention and program attention was high, ad attention was lower. That's starting to equal out a little bit more, but trends like that, I think the industry is really sort of trying to understand how should they value CTV advertising and what can they do to maximize their strategies for how they approach CTV. So thinking about the efficacy or the impact of ads on CTV compared to linear is certainly a topic that we're interested in. Another thing that is, I think, pretty unique in TVision's data set is co-viewing. So the opportunity to have multiple people in the room, and what does that do to the impact of an ad. We actually did a pretty interesting study about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, through the ARF with a person named Ken Mallon, who was a researcher. Ken Wilbur, who was a researcher at the University of San Diego, and he looked at the impact of co-viewing on CTV, or not on CTV, co-viewing on attention, and did having more people in the room impact attention. I think this isn't something that we've necessarily looked at for CTV specifically. So any kind of trends around co-viewing and the likelihood of people to co-view in CTV, intentional viewing, that kind of thing related to CTV, and possibly how that would differ for CTV versus linear, I think is an interesting topic. Another one would be creative performance. So creative would be basically ads, and how do ads perform differently across linear and CTV? Is there an ideal ad length? Are there certain creative elements that work better? Do ads targeted to younger viewers draw more engagement in CTV? One thing that we've seen, I think, that has gotten a lot of attention is about repeat ads in CTV. So the frequency of ads or the rotation of ads, seeing sort of the same creative over and over again. Is there an ideal rotation or an ideal frequency? All those types of questions about creative in CTV, I think, are interesting. Another opportunity is maybe to look at sort of trying to map out the viewer journey. I don't think there's a lot understood about how people engage in CTV. If they, have a favorite app, how does that influence how they browse between apps? If they have, for instance, Netflix installed, are they looking primarily or watching Netflix primarily? And if so, what are the other apps' opportunity to engage viewers? What types of content engage viewers from other apps? That kind of thing. So I think, Netflix is definitely the gorilla in the space. And so if, other apps are always trying to figure out how do they crack CTV share and get more time spent and more viewing within their apps. And then I think another thing that's kind of interesting is CTV first viewers. So people who start their viewing experience on CTV, or possibly linear first viewers. Again, people who start their viewing experience on traditional television. Who are they? How do they behave? What is the right way to reach them? How do they move across different platforms? Is there an easier bridge for them between linear and CTV? For instance, if you're a traditional linear viewer, are you more likely to just watch Netflix? Or is it easier for you to use an MVPD or maybe something like a Hulu to make that jump between linear and CTV? And then lastly, I think that there are some CTV programming tentpoles. And when we talk about a tentpole, we mean things like, for instance, Handmaid's Tale on Hulu or Stranger Things on Netflix. how do these big sort of binge watching, highly promoted CTV programs impact viewer behavior? Do they need to be, is there an ideal frequency of tentpoles, or how do apps convert people from watching one tentpole to viewing other programming within their app, things like that. So you're sort of understanding the impact of programming tentpoles and how to capture and retain those users for other programming within the app, or possibly even convert them from one app to another. So yeah, so those are just some examples, but I think we're super interested in CTV research. I think the industry is very interested in CTV research. Feel free to explore ideas that are not on this list. I think that's why we're doing this open calls, because you guys are going to have great ideas, and this is just a few thought starters. And then I think if we'll go to the next slide, these are the types of data sets that we have available. Kelsey kind of walked through some of the data elements, but we could give you guys, distinct data samples for CTV ad impressions, CTV program impressions, OTT device person level impressions, linear ad impressions, linear TV program impressions. And I think we will make that available upon request if you want to see what some of these data samples are as you do your, as you work on your submission. We can share some of those files so that you can take a look and get a sense of what data is available.
All the data samples as well have a data dictionary, like a data schema with all of the data types. So if that is a question